Okay, let's go to Juscelino Colares. He's the international law professor at Case Western Reserve University. Thank you for joining us tonight. How rare is it to see prosecutors from this court seek these kinds of charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity?
Well, it's especially rare with respect to the only Western nation ally in the Middle East who's a democracy, and against Israel. I mean, the ICC evidently, both the United States and the EU are in agreement, and they have designated Hamas a terrorist organization. And while the United States and European countries may have their occasional differences or in terms of how to conduct a war with Israel, they know Israel is conducting the war in accordance to the rules of international law, so it's extremely rare, and it seems to be quite problematic since the ICC has no jurisdiction over Israel or the United States, for that matter, because the United States is not a signatory to the Rome Charter or to the ICC Charter.
Yeah. They don't have jurisdiction over Israel and the U.S., as you mentioned, but they do have jurisdiction over Gaza and the West Bank. And I guess that's where they're saying these crimes have happened. It puts Netanyahu beside
a jurisdiction that the United States and Israel do not recognize.
I understand that. But it does put Netanyahu beside a terrorist group leader and other leaders like Vladimir Putin, Muammar Gaddafi. What do you make of this?
Well, it's incredibly unfortunate that the ICC's prosecutor to seek arrest warrants against apparently both sides here seems designed to create a false equivalence between a democracy that has a robust court system, that has an army that conducts, that throws leaflets, that creates ways for civilians to mitigate civilian deaths, while at the same time you have an opponent that actually targets civilians. And to make a false equivalence between the two sides is absolutely preposterous.
Okay, so two questions here. What does it tell you that they've decided to go this route? And second of all, Netanyahu has recently made decisions, his government made decisions to change the way the court system works in Israel so that it is more heavily weighted towards politics than it is towards the independence of the judiciary. So what does it tell you that they've put Netanyahu on the same plane as the Hamas leader? And do you think that recent changes to the judicial system in Israel factors in here?
I actually think this is a same old story. This is why the appellate body of the World Trade Organization and why numerous international tribunals are no longer functioning, because these tribunals that emerge under the agreements of sovereign nations, over time they tend to develop a sense that they do not respond to the people who created these organizations, and they have a life of their own, and they start to make up law as they go. And when they do that, they not only aggrandize themselves in their power, but they overreach, and then they lose credibility, which is the case right now.
Okay, but
as to your second point regarding Prime Minister Netanyahu,
yes,
Prime Minister Netanyahu wants to basically have in Israel a system where similar to separation of powers that we have in the United States, which is absolutely defined. Nobody would accuse the United States by having a system of co-equal branches of government, not with the case, the native entry system.
Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Colares, I think we lost the last bit of your answer there. The audio cut out. You were saying they wouldn't compare it to the U.S. Why?
I mean, nobody would accuse the United States by having a system of co-equal branches of power, the judiciary, legislative, and the executive, as being a system where the courts do not necessarily sit, as the ultimate higher than the other branches, as a system that is antagonistic to democracy. That is the system that Prime Minister Netanyahu wants to create, and which Judge Barak, in the 1990s created in Israel out of whole cloth. That was never approved by a constitutional amendment in Israel. That was never approved by the Knesset. The judge basically said that we are above the other branches. And this is something that the political body, the Knesset, is trying to reestablish a balance between judiciary and the legislative/executive, because they're a parliamentary system. So this is not, Israel is a democracy. There's no doubt about that. It's a democracy where 20%, about 20% of the population are Arabs, where Arabs elect and have a seat, and they were in the previous government that was defeated in the last elections.
But do you think that just because it is a democracy, that Benjamin Netanyahu should not then face charges under an international court banner? And I understand that Israel has not signed on to the International Criminal Court, so there is no jurisdiction here. But he should not be charged simply because he runs a nation that is democratic.
I think this is absolutely preposterous. Israel is defending itself once it was attacked. Take the example of France, when after the Charlie Hebdo event happened, where innocent French journalists and civilians were murdered by a group of terrorists, and Israel the next day attacked a source of those terrorists in Syria, and killed individuals, and nobody said anything about it.
Individuals are different from 35,000 people dead in Gaza, of which many, if not the majority, are assumed to be civilians at this point, and not even Israel is clear on how many. Not even Israel is clear on how many members of Hamas have been killed compared to civilians.
Thank you for quoting the Hamas Ministry of Health numbers. And
do you have a better number that you can share?
Hamas evidently has a history of fabricating evidence, as in the case that they basically said that the hospital had been attacked by Israel, when it's actually one of their missiles that fired against civilian population in Israel misfired and hit the hospital, and Israel had nothing to do with it. Anyway, long story short, what we have is an attempt by the ICC to establish a false equivalence between a democracy, between a country that follows the rules of international warfare, between a very moral army, an army of armed servicemen and women that is fighting an enemy that hides behind civilians. And of course, there are, as is unavoidable in any such urban conflict, there will be tragic loss of civilian life. But Israel is, despite Israel's attempt to mitigate these harms, what this charge by the prosecutor does is to basically throw all of that in the same basket with what Hamas did. And of course, there's food going into Gaza, and we all know, and that's documented, it's filmed, that the moment these trucks, 8 trucks, food trucks go in, Hamas takes control, and basically these products do not make it directly without the hand of Hamas touching them.
Okay.
And that's something that the prosecutor is completely missing. Is missing from the picture here.
Complicated situation. I'd love to talk more, but I gotta move on. Mr. Colares, thanks for your time.
You're most welcome. Thank you.